Hi, and welcome to GROGTALK. I'm James. Where are we from today, Dan? Oh, really? We're from there. Well, that's very good. What are we going to talk about? Okay, it's obviously not. It's not Dan. I was going with someone a little cheaper, someone who doesn't complain as much. This is Jack. Actually, Dan and I are on a little break, getting ready for Grogcon 22, which is coming up very shortly. So today I'm going to be interviewing Bill Barton, who wrote "So You Want to Be a Rock Star," among other things. Hopefully the audio issues I had have been somewhat resolved, but as usual, the gremlins did affect us. I hope you enjoy it, and we'll see you real soon. So again, with that, here is Bill Barton. All right. Well, I'm so glad to now be speaking to Bill Barton. And Bill Barton is the author of "So You Want to Be a Rock Star." And for those who have been keeping track of our shenanigans here at GROGTALK, here is the copy that Rob Ritchie, our Tim Kask, sent to me as a gift. And I'm like, oh, we have to run it. So we're running it at this year's Grogcon. And Rob decided he was going to reach out to Bill. And Bill was gracious enough to pick up the phone and talk to him for a while. And now he's on the phone with me. So Bill, welcome to GrogCon. We're out. Excellent, excellent. So we chatted a little bit before we started. So maybe you could briefly tell us how you got into role-playing games.
No, I was a board gamer almost from the time I could read, and my sister and I and our aunt, we would play different board games, the old ones like Sorry and Monopoly, Risk, those things. I eventually got into other board games, more expensive ones. There was a shop here in Indianapolis, and it may still be here. I haven't checked in years, but it was called the Boardroom, and I'd go there and I'd get we'd get some of the old SPI or Avalon Hill games, and a friend of mine and I would play those together. After a while, we heard about a gaming club that was being held at one of the community centers, so we decided we'd go check it out one day, and got there, and it was mostly there were a couple rooms. There was one group playing a role-playing game in one room, and then the other rooms people were doing board games. So we took a board game and we, started playing there. But after a while, we got to be curious, thinking, well, we can do the board game anywhere. Let's check out this role-playing thing and see what that's all about. So we looked in, and they were playing the game Traveler,
Okay.
which is, you might remember the old
Oh,
science
yeah.
fiction game.
Sure.
And we just kind of watched one time and then asked if we could sit in next time. So they helped us, with the roll up some characters. And the next time we played, my friend and I joined in and played with them. So we started doing that for a while, and after a while, I kind of got to thinking, I think I could do this. I think I could run one of these games. So by then, I'd bought all the books that were available, and started as a little boxed edition was what we started out with. And so I took one of the preset adventures. It was I don't remember the name of it. It was some kind of a space station or a station on like a planetary station.
Yeah.
In the Arctic or something.
Right. I remember.
And so
yeah, go ahead.
So I kind of put that together, but I kind of thought that it was a little bit short, so I created some extra characters for it, a submarine captain and some other NPCs, and that kind of extended it a bit. And so everyone seemed to enjoy it, so I started doing that, at various other the written adventures, and I kind of elaborated on them, and finally I did a campaign that I wrote myself that kind of took them on a quest across various solar systems. And there was a company called F F
FASA?
yeah, FASA. Yeah, that was it. Sorry, the memory's going a little bit here.
No, it's all happening. No problem, Bill,
But
at all.
by then I was writing reviews for Space Gamer magazine, and I'd written a review, and it wasn't completely favorable of one of their products. So they kind of contacted me, and we talked. And then they went ahead and from there they started putting out new products that were much better, I thought. And so we kind of kept a real a conversation going. And at one point they asked if I'd be interested in writing one of the adventures for them. And of course I said, well, sure, I had one that I'd been running at various game conventions that I called Time Traveler,
Okay.
and in which the adventures went back in time to Victorian London, because Victorian London and Sherlock Holmes and H.G. Wells, they were all favorites of mine.
Right.
So I sent them back there and ran adventures like that, and they kind of wanted that, but it was kind of like, well, it wasn't really written up. So I tried to put something together, but it didn't quite work. So by that time, they started publishing a Star Trek game and asked me to do some stuff for that. So I wrote a few little pieces on and off for that, some alien races and that sort of thing. But in the meantime, I discovered Call of Cthulhu,
Okay.
which Lovecraft was one of my favorites. I started reading him in college. A friend of mine loaned me the Color Out of Space, and I read it, and I was just fascinated. And I read some more and saw how it was a connected universe. So we eventually, read all the Lovecraft and as many of the connected Cthulhu mythos books by other authors that I could. So when Call of Cthulhu was announced, I was like, wow, I got to get this. I was going to game conventions, and I'd kind of been talking with the people at Chaosium and, learned about it and what was coming out. And when it did, I kind of approached them and asked them if they'd be interested in a Victorian supplement.
Right.
So they said sure, because they were looking to expand the game outside the 1920s. So I wrote up Cthulhu by Gaslight, and did an adventure of it with it, and kind of included some Sherlockian elements to it, the Yorkshire horrors, and so I did all that, and eventually it was published and ended up I think it was winning the Gamers Choice Award.
Wow.
For that year at the Origins convention.
And what year is that, Bill?
That I think it was for 1986.
Okay.
It was late, or it might have been 87 because, excuse me, 87 because it was late in 86. I think it came out, but because I remember writing it, and I took a break and went outside and I turned the TV on, and it was the Challenger disaster.
Oh, okay, yeah, 1986,
So,
right, yeah.
Right, so that helps me remember exactly when it was.
And that's amazing, those kind of super tragic, I was not old enough when, either Kennedy was assassinated. So when Reagan was almost assassinated, everyone remembers that, and the Challenger during the 80s, I'm sure those were memorable things. I want to go back a second, because definitely Cthulhu by Gaslight, you're well known for, but that's in 1986. So you started role-playing in the early 80s, is that a fair statement? You were...
Yeah, I think it was about 1980.
Okay. And I was reading an interview you did a while back where you used to play, like you said, Avalon Hill, which was kind of the gateway for my brother. My brother's older than me, and he had Starship Troopers, and I saw you played Starship Troopers as well.
Yes,
So,
yes.
So that game captured my imagination as a young child, and I don't remember if we won or lost. My brother was 6 years older than me, and I think I was 10, so he clearly could have beat me. We also played Panzer Leader, which is another Avalon Hill game. So, but it sounds to me that whereas most of the people we know, if they did wargaming or some kind of, that kind of Avalon Hill game, they gravitated to D&D, but you really started with Traveller and more of the science fiction, and then you went into Cthulhu. So did you ever play D&D at all? Was that something you're even interested in?
Actually, that is one game I actually never did
You've
play.
never played Dungeons and Dragons. Okay,
Right. Yeah,
great.
well, I had other people at the game club who would run various games, but none of them ever ran D&D when I was there. I remember playing Tunnels and Trolls,
Okay, right.
um,
Which is
and
offshoot like it, but yeah, sure.
right, and the Fantasy Trip by Steve
Oh, Fantasy
Jackson.
Trip. Yeah. So and
And
okay.
there were a couple other. There was some Kingdom of the Something Throne,
Petal of the Empire of the Petal Throne.
and
That's
I remember playing that once. And most of the games though that we played were more contemporary, was it Mercenaries and Spies and Private Eyes, something like that. And other games like that we would play. Also superhero games. Um, Played Villains and Vigilantes, I
oh,
think, starting out first superhero game.
right, right.
And then Chasm said they were going to do Super World, so I contributed a little bit to that, did play testing for them on that, and got a contributor's credit for that on the first edition of that.
Okay.
And I think I wrote an article for a supplement about weather in Super World and how that works with weather control and that sort of thing.
It's just fascinating that, again, most of the people we've talked to, they they read Vance and they read Fritz Leiber and that kind of ilk, and they may have gone back to Lovecraft and Wells, like some of the people you've talked about, Jules Verne, more of that turn of the century futuristic kind of vision of the future, extended future. But it's great to hear someone who basically skirted by all that kind of D&D lore. So the reason I brought it up also is, so you did also worked with Steve Jackson, not the Steve Jackson from England, but the Steve Jackson from the States, his game, and you worked on Space GURPS, correct? Was that your first big published work, or was that after Call of Cthulhu?
It was Space that came after Cthulhu by Gaslight.
Oh, okay.
And in fact, I think I don't remember if it was like a year after or 2 years after, but it started out as a completely different project. They wanted to do a book on Andre Norton's Merchant class series, with several books that Norton had written. And so I had started out on that, and then after a few months work on that, they decided they wanted to do a generic Space. So I had to greatly expand that, and then I think I ended up writing about twice as much material as they ended up including in the book. So stuff. Steve decided he wanted to do some other things in it, so it ended up a co-credit with him, which I certainly can't complain about.
No.
So and then that won the Gamer's Choice Award at Origins the year it came out as well.
And so coming up, it's a big leap from, in just a few years, you went from being more of a board gamer to a player to a game master to creating your own games. What was the leap? How did you prepare to go from, it's a big thing from writing you have a game system and you're developing an adventure or module, to creating your own role-playing game. What made you want to do that versus just creating adventures for known role-playing settings?
Oh well, again, it was kind of like talking with people. As I go to Gen Con just about every year, and I talk to the creators and the various games, and they were always looking for new people to try something. And so I've been writing reviews and occasional articles for Space Gamer. They knew who I was, so I was invited to write something if I wanted to, and that's why I kind of came around to the idea of Cthulhu by Gaslight.
Okay.
Because I'd always been a big fan of Sherlock Holmes and H.G. Wells, and in fact that Traveler adventure I mentioned, once they were time traveled back to Victorian London, they ended up in the middle of the War of the Worlds.
Oh wow. Okay.
So it was
The original War of the Worlds,
right. So it was
not the radio
futuristic
version.
weaponry against Martian tripods.
Mm. So,
So
and it's interesting because that was a big mashup, right? From this, when I growing up, we watched all the Star Treks, and of course, half the plots felt like they were always going back in time, or they're going to a world that was an analog Earth, but there was some, they were going back to where the Nazis were, and they went back to the bootleg era, Prohibition era. So I think the one time in the later shows they went back to turn of the century, and this time turn of the century, turn of the 20th century, San Francisco. So there's always that throwback because you have period pieces, and there's some grounding to it. I guess is
right.
that the allure to it? So let's talk about Call of Cthulhu. I have played a couple of times, not as the keeper, but as a player. Found it very interesting. Again, coming from the D&D world where your character, you're trying to have them survive. The story is important, but not as important as your character and your group surviving, to where Call of Cthulhu, it's all about the mystery and the drama, and your guy dies, that kind of comes with the territory sometime. So
Right.
Call of Cthulhu typically, just like Lovecraft, was more. So would you consider the Lovecraftian time from the 20s and 30s, and Victorians the one before that? Is that kind of the time periods? Is that correct in your mind, or how do you look at that?
Yeah. Well, the first games, of course, we played. We did them in the 20s. And in fact, I even wrote an adventure for the 20s, the Curse of Chogner Fawn, which was one of the Lovecraft old ones that another author had created and hadn't been incorporated into the game yet. So I wrote that. I think that was the first that's published of mine. But then I decided, why not try taking it back to Victorian times? So I started running games back in there. And again, that's what I had asked them if they had any interest in that as a background piece. So actually, I'd also before that I'd written an article for Space Gamer on a gamer's guide to Victorian London.
Okay.
Which was a lot. It was quite a bit scaled down, but it was kind of the same idea in case anyone wanted to use Victorian London as a background. So for Cthulhu by Gaslight, I greatly expanded on that theme and edited it, put it into Lovecraft's world.
So I'm sorry. Yeah. So Bill, again, as someone who hasn't played, hasn't run as a keeper, is the rules for Cthulhu by Gaslight identical to the rules for the regular Call of Cthulhu, or is there something specific, period specific? Because obviously there's almost every Cthulhu in space, Cthulhu in ancient Rome, the pyramids. So what differentiates, if at all, Cthulhu by Gaslight versus the regular Call of Cthulhu?
Okay, well, it uses the same rules.
Okay.
There are twists like different weapons, old double-barreled shotguns, and elephant guns, and things like that. So it was just mostly taking the period flavor and adapting that to the rules.
Right.
So there were new character types, and just like I said, a lot of new things, just expanding on the original game and taking it out of the 20s.
Yeah, making it period specific, but the rules set themselves. So if you played Call of Cthulhu, doing Cthulhu by Gaslight, it's not a leap from understanding the game. It's just understanding the period that goes with it. Okay.
Right. Yeah. In fact, all the Chaosium games all use the same basic rule system.
Okay.
It was originally derived from their Rune Quest, and then they used it across all the other games: Cthulhu, Call of Cthulhu, Super World, books like that. So they put out one that was like a three-parter that was fantasy, science fiction, and superhero. Again, using the same rule system, just expanding on those in those areas. And
Now,
then the
oh, good.
Hero one they expanded into Super World.
Okay. So, we interact with folks shockingly around the world. It's insane. Of course, with the modern
Mm-hmm.
internet. Um, so we know a lot of folks from the Great Britain, the United Kingdom, and while they played D&D, and that was obviously the predominant game for a while, there tends to be a lot of passion for RuneQuest and for Call of Cthulhu. Did you get a lot of fans from England or the United Kingdom reaching out to you about Cthulhu by Gaslight because of obviously the period piece?
Um, Actually, not very much
Oh,
really.
really? Okay.
Yeah, it was.
Well, maybe you will now. Maybe this will be the resurgence.
Yeah,
We're
yeah. This of course, this was pre-internet,
right.
so it would, there wasn't really that much of a. And I really didn't have a. I had a most of what I didn't even have a computer. Well, I had a computer, but I didn't use it. Most of what I wrote was on typewriter.
Sure.
So I would type them out and then read them over and make handwritten corrections and send them in.
Now, you're also a writer by trade as well. I mean, that was your profession that you.
Uh, yeah, I was actually I was an editor.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I
I
guess you have to write first before you can edit, right? Isn't that how
yeah,
it works, or something like that?
uh,
So,
yeah. Well, I had a degree from Indiana University in English composition
okay,
slash journalism, and almost right out after I graduated, I got a job at the Saturday Evening Post.
oh wow,
I was as an assistant copy editor, and from there, when the copy editor left, I became the copy editor. So I worked there for 3 years, editing the magazine, that and one called Country Gentleman, and there were several newsletters that the company put out that I edited as well.
Yeah.
Uh,
So you had that background.
right,
Did
yeah. From there, I went to Endless Vacation magazine. I was there quite a number of years. Um, so in fact, I was there during the time I wrote Gaslight and some of the other things.
oh, okay, but obviously you have that background and passion to do that. So it's not a far fetch on your free time to come up with this, especially tying in your uh, interest in Victorian period literature and gaming. That all came together. So Bill,
Mhm.
what if you're creating, because again, I've never created a Call of Cthulhu adventure. What are the key elements that I would want in it? What makes a good Call of Cthulhu adventure from your perspective?
All right. Well, you have to first come up with a god or a creature or something that from the mythos that'll fit whatever you're thinking of doing. Um, like I said, I wrote the Curse of Chogner Fawn, which I decided that I wanted to put Chogner Fawn into the game, and from there I kind of worked backwards from that to what would be a good adventure. How would he work in the game? What mysterious elements would you pull in? And I kind of pulled in various elements for different Lovecraft stories, and then kind of fit them together in my mind. And then I wrote kind of a very rough outline. Most people wouldn't even recognize this as an outline. It was more like
Right.
little pieces of paper that I had things written on, and kind of brought them all together and kind of fit them into a narrative, and then just start writing from there. So that's usually how I do it.
But as far as like when I create a D&D adventure, I kind of say, well, you got to have a big bad guy. In this case, it's the deity or the mythos creature, right?
Mhm.
There has to be some things they have to find in order to defeat the bad guy.
Mhm.
Um, there should be some setbacks. There should be some friends. There should be some allies. It's if we're doing a 4-hour session, you need about 6 encounters. That kind of thing is the parameters that you kind of throw in the soup. Um,
Uh-huh.
and wanting the characters or the players' choices to have some effect. And if you know your players, some like more combat. Obviously, with Call of Cthulhu, combat is not really encouraged for the most part. You
All
should try to
right.
you should try to avoid that at all costs because it's super deadly. At least from my experience, it was, that as a D&D player, your answer is not fighting things. In fact, your answer is typically running away. So, is there, investigations can be challenging in other, that's really not the focus of other games. And so in Call of Cthulhu, that's, you're trying to elicit some, you're trying to solve some mystery. Like you said, what's the curse? What's the curse there? Is there tropes that work better in Call of Cthulhu than others? Because again, I've never written one, so I'm trying to get some insight into what you think really works well. If I was to write an adventure, I pick one of the deities. What are the tropes that are easy for a beginning keeper to do versus, one that's very experienced?
Okay, well, I always found it was good to have some really well-developed NPCs, characters that the players get to interact with, and have to try to determine what their motives are. I almost always had a red herring of some kind that the players would latch on to, thinking, "Oh, this is the bad guy," and 9 times out of 10 it wouldn't be,
right? Okay,
because that would be too easy, of course.
Yeah.
But then things, little clues and little bits of information that would help them get down certain paths, little sidetracks sometimes, interesting, but not necessarily part of the main adventure, but something they can do if they want to go off and investigate this. That's kind of why Call of Cthulhu characters are called investigators, because they want to get in there and investigate, find out what the situation is, what's going on, what's behind it. And again, it kind of varies. Like I had a character in Charles Fawn that was he was like had a club foot. So they're in this spooky. They break into his house thinking they're going to find something, and they hear this kind of weird clunk, clunk, clunk sound coming. And of course, they think it's a monster. So they're getting ready to blow them away, or else run away, depending on who it was. So just little things like that. Atmosphere, little red herrings, rich characters they can interact with, and an interesting setting or situation. Like I did for the Cthulhu Now, I did the adventure, The Killer Out of Space, which was based on The Color Out of Space, only it was in modern times.
Okay.
So it involved the space shuttle accidentally running into the color out of space in orbit after the end of the adventure that Lovecraft wrote. And it got on board and caused the shuttle to crash. And so then the area was all cordoned off by the military. But someone from inside called the investigators, an old friend, and said something's going on here that's not right. It's not what they say. It's not an anthrax breakout. It's something else. So that got the investigators to decide, well, let's go check it out. So, they get in there, and among the people they meet is this crazy old preacher who seems to know what's going on. And they think, well, let's ally with him, and he's going to help us. And of course, in the end, he turns out to be completely nuts and leads them down the wrong path. So end up having to get out of that, and then after everything else, they finally end up having to face the color, which 9 times out of 10, that's fatal for. Most games, I had one player. I did a campaign. It was one of the published campaigns. Something about Yog-Sothoth, Shadow of Yog-Sothoth.
Okay, right.
And led them on a long campaign. I added things myself to it. But by the end of the campaign, only one of the original characters was still there. And that was because almost every time they ran into a monster or a creature or something, he immediately went insane and went catatonic. And that saved his life.
He just shut down. He just shut
So
down.
By the time everything was over, he wakes up and goes, "Oh, what happened?" So and so got eaten.
Oh my goodness, that's
So he survived the entire campaign, only to get killed at the end of it by a werewolf. And one of the ones I ran for the Chaosium had published in a book just of regular monsters.
oh okay, yeah, because the to your point, it can be tied to the mythos, but you also can add in any of the supernatural creatures or
Right.
normal creatures. Okay. So you did that for a while, and I want to segue to what brought us here, or why we're talking together. Is I read your forward, and I'm holding up for the folks watching your opus work. So you want to be a rock star, right? So, and
Right.
I read the forward, and I read your interviews. So tell me how you went from building games for others, not really for others, but based on other programs, and then doing GURPS, to wanting to do really something that was at least unique from my perspective, which is a rock and roll RPG.
Okay. Well, I'd always been into rock and roll. I mean, I first got turned on by the Beatles when they first came out. And in fact, that was my last semester in grade school, and some friends of mine and we got together and did a Beatles parody. We called it the Cockroaches.
That's
So
great.
we kind of we pantomimed the Beatles records. I'd taken styrofoam and cut out guitars like the Beatles actually had, and pasted covers to them. So stuck yardsticks in them for the fretboard, and then we got up and did "I Want to Hold Your Hand" and some others. And we had there was this giant styrofoam hand that someone had made for the school, and so I borrowed it, and we had somebody stick the hand out when we did "I Want to Hold Your Hand," that sort of thing.
Mm.
So anyway, we did that, and then we kind of got to talking about, well, we ought to really form a band, and we kind of talked that over for a few years. I finally talked my aunt into getting me a guitar, electric guitar, but it was one of those uh, Japanese models with the strings like a half an inch above the frets.
Oh, right.
Right, so I could barely press down on them, so I kind of messed with that and learned a few chords, but that was several years. Meanwhile, I was in drama club at school, in a number of plays and things, and one of my friends in there decided he wanted to get a guitar and start playing, but that was right when the Monkees TV show came on. So he was inspired by that, so he got a good guitar. I think it was a Gretsch.
Oh, wow.
I can't remember it was a Gretsch solid body. I can't remember the name of it, but he got that, and I tried playing, and it was like, whoa, I can push these strings down. So I managed to talk my aunt into getting me one. It was a cheaper model. It wasn't the same one. His had a vibro arm and two pickups, and mine was just a single pickup. It still played well, and so once I got that, I actually started learning how to play the guitar. So we kind of decided we were going to put a band together. So we recruited a guy I knew from drama club who was a singer, and a friend of my other friends was going to be the drummer, but he wasn't really into it, so he dropped out pretty quick. And then we recruited another guy from the drama club, and he took over as the drummer. Now my friend, um, he was an only child. Well, no, I guess he had a brother, a much older brother, but it was just him and his mom. And so she liked to indulge him, so she basically bought him everything. He equipped the entire band.
Oh, I love those kind of people. They're great.
Yeah. So so we got us a PA system. And he got several guitars. He ended up trading the Gretsch in for a Gibson SG, and he got a Gretsch 12 string.
Wow.
And I started off with a Greco, I think it was, knockoff of the Hofner fiddle bass.
Mm-hmm.
And he bought the drums for the drummer and everything, and bought a couple Fender amps, a bandmaster and a bassmaster. And so we kind of, even though I had my guitar, I ended up, when we got the band together, I ended up using his SG most of the time,
Sure.
or the 12 string, because he decided he'd be the bass player. He eventually got a Fender Precision bass instead. which I think he probably still has. He told me he was going to keep them for his children.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a beautiful, well, a late 1960s P bass is worth a lot of money. So that's some serious equipment back there for,
Yeah, yeah,
and you're in high
yeah,
school at this point, or even younger than that? You're in junior
yeah,
high?
yeah. It was high school. It was about
Okay.
I think this was about '67 when we
Okay.
started. So we started out, like because he was a big Monkees fan. He had one of these big Monkees chord books. We started out playing a lot of Monkey songs. And we would just play like we play for drama club parties where they didn't really care what we played. But we also, I used to write plays, little short skits and parodies for some of the festivals they had at high school. And I did one based on the Monkees. I called it the Flunkies. And so we actually played songs during that, like in a Monkees adventure. So it was like,
So yeah, you had a long pedigree. Did it ever get past high school, or did you keep playing afterwards that, or?
yeah, I played in that band through high school. We went through several name changes. We started out as the Lunar Surface, Looner, and then we changed to the Kaleidoscope Tears because we wanted to be more psychedelic. And then finally we went to Crater because we wanted to be more hard rock. so, we played a lot of the '60s classics and things. Then after school, the band kind of broke up and we drifted apart. And then I was working in the the college scene shop, theater scene shop, with a guy, and he said, I mentioned how we used to play. I used to play, and I'd written some songs and I played them for him, and he said that we ought to get a band together, and he'd manage us. So he had a girlfriend who was a good singer, and she knew a lead guitarist, and I managed to get the singer and the bass player back in from our high school band. Except by then he wanted to play guitar.
Mm.
I started out on rhythm guitar, and he was on bass guitar. But we switched, so he was on rhythm guitar and keyboards, and I was on bass guitar. So he'd written a few songs, so we called ourselves India, with INDYA
Mm.
for Indianapolis.
Which is where you're from, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Not the
we
not the
get
Formula Ones or the whatever. I forgot the Open. I don't know what they're called. Isn't that Formula Ones? Are they? No, they're not Formula Ones. What are those? The
yeah
Indianapolis,
the 500.
the 500. Yeah, I don't know what kind of
Yeah.
cars there are. I'm sure. I'm showing my complete ignorance on racing. I know. That,
Yeah, I don't know that much about it myself. I grew up here, but anyway, so like I said, we had that little band together, and we went we recorded a tape of original songs, and the manager sent it into this contest called the Intercollegiate Music Festival, and we got a letter saying we'd been accepted for the sectionals. So we we packed up our gear into a station wagon, and we drove out to I think it was in Carbondale, Illinois, at the university there, and we performed in there, and I thought we did really good, but the problem, we were doing all original music, and the other bands were doing like Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young covers
oh, right.
and that sort of thing. So in our category, we ended up taking third place, which wasn't bad, but we lost to a cover band.
Was it out of three, or was there more than three
Um,
bands? Then that was good.
I can't, I don't remember how many played there. There were a number of them,
Okay, so I was just
but
teasing because that's I always say, oh, we came in third out of three, which is never good.
yeah,
So, but
yeah,
if you,
yeah. So, but it was interesting to do. We came back and we played at a local movie theater between the showings at Woodstock, um, and
that's a
trying to think
tough
what.
gig when you've got some of the best things in rock playing Woodstock, and then you're coming out and playing, you're the house band. That's funny.
Right, yeah. So we did that, and then that band kind of a couple of people decided to leave that band, and it kept going. We got some other people in to replace them, and then again, people dropped out, so it ended up being me and a guitarist, and we had a drummer. We played around various places for the summer, and then joined another band. And yeah, I said we played various places here in the city and around. And anyway, that was kind of my background. We never made a lot of money. It was all for fun
Sure.
mostly. So,
And
but
you
that
did that through the 70s pretty much?
yeah.
And then
So
did you play in the 80s as well with bands, or was it that?
uh, uh, kind of the band kind of broke up. You know, I kind of took a hiatus there for a while. Wasn't really playing much. Just sometimes we'd get together and jam just for fun.
Right.
Um, but anyway, by that time, like I said, I got into the role playing games, and I got to trying to think, well, what would be a different kind of a game? And I got to think, oh wait, well, what about a rock and roll playing game, playing the pun on roll?
Right.
Yeah, and it kind of gave me the idea. And then at the time there was a small company doing traveler products in I think they were in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I'm not sure they were one of the other towns here, and I'd corresponded with them, and I worked reviewed some of the products, and I shipped the idea to them, and they were really enthusiastic over it. So I was originally going to get it for them. So started working on it, and we doing play testing some of the scenarios with my regular gaming group, and then I had the manuscript all done and all complete, and it sent it to them, and kept getting well, we can't get it right just now, and well, we're not going to be able to do it just now.
Mm.
The thing is, they even though they rented a table at Gen Con, and I went there with nothing but a notebook and the printed out pages for it to show for it.
Right.
I took other stuff with me to sell, games I had, used games and things to sell,
And what year is this? Is this 1990 or is this?
that would have been, I think, maybe 89.
Okay, so it's right before you finish the game. I mean, you've just finished the game, but it's not published at this point. I'm just trying to remember.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
Yeah, it was just a manuscript. So so after a while, it became kind of apparent they weren't going to do anything. They kept talking about another game they were going to do, and they never did anything with it. And their products kind of slipped away, and ended up in the bargain bin at the game store. So it was kind of like, well, I wonder what I do with it. And I had a guy there who worked at the game store, and he was kind of a, did sales and stuff, and he said, well, let's publish it. And we'll publish it ourselves. We'll call it Winter Hawk Games, because he had created a mercenary group that he called, for Traveler, he had called the Winter Hawk Mercenaries.
Okay.
So anyway, so I said, well, okay. So, got it all down. I can't remember what point he dropped out, though. Because originally I found an artist who had created a Winter Hawk Games symbol for us, and he did some artwork. The artwork actually ended up appearing in the game, and then at one point the guy dropped out, and I was kind of trying to decide what to do. And he said, "Well, hey, why don't you go ahead and publish it yourself? Call it Bill Barton Games. Your name's known in the gaming business." Okay. I didn't have any better ideas at the time, so I thought, okay, well, I'll go ahead and do it. And my wife amazingly agreed that we could take our savings and pay for the publishing. So
and that's a huge risk, and it wasn't cheap. It's not like today, internet publishing. I mean, you've got printing, which is very expensive, and marketing. You're doing it all yourself, so that's incredible.
Yeah. It was. This was right before Windows came out, because I did it on a DOS computer.
Right.
I can't remember which word processing program I used. Oh no, I remember I got an actual publishing program. I don't remember the name of it. It was a very, very early publishing program. So I managed to publish it. I had a scanner. I scanned in the artwork. I put all the pages together and everything. And then there was a local printer. So I had the artwork and the cover that the artist had done for us. And
Yep.
I went to talk to him, and kind of ended up figuring out a price point that we could actually publish it at. We couldn't afford a full color cover or anything, so we went with a 3-color, and that's why you see the color as the cover as it is. I kind of used have a spotlight on it. And
yeah, I think it's fine.
background.
I mean, if you didn't point out to me that it wasn't full color, I wouldn't have known that. It seemed, I mean, it seemed colorish. It's only it's only now that you mention, I'm like, oh yeah, I guess there is only 3 colors. So that's no problem.
But anyway, and so we kind of dropped most of our savings into it at the time, hoping we'd make it back, which unfortunately we did not.
Yeah,
but
our friend Rob, I guess his purchase was a little too late to help in last year.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, so I went ahead and got a table at Gen Con that year, and I got a couple friends to go with me, and we went and we sold it at Gen Con.
And this is Gen Con 90 this time, correct? Is this 90?
What was that?
This is Gen Con 90?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
That was the year we published it, so it would have been Gen Con 90.
And the only reason I mentioned that is because I found online someone is selling, it's not on eBay, it's some other site, So You Want to Be a Rock Star, signed by you from Gen Con 1990. It's out there.
Okay.
So
All
that's why I was asking. So I may need to pick that up so I have a collector's item. So
okay.
So it says "Rock On" by Bill Barton. That's what you wrote
Yep.
on it. So go ahead. I'm sorry. So you're at Gen Con 1990. You and your wife have put all your money into this, and you're at Gen Con. And is this in Indianapolis or still in Wisconsin?
I think it was still in Wisconsin at that time.
Okay. Yeah, I don't remember when it moved to Indianapolis. So
yeah, I'm pretty sure.
You pack up the car, you head up to Wisconsin, and you are, trying to sell this in front of thousands of people. That's a daunting task. So how did that go?
Yeah. Well, again, I took some stuff that I had, some extra old games that I had that I was going to sell some things like at one time for a Sherlock Holmes group I was in, I did a Sherlockian trivia set. So I had an extra copy of that left over, so I took it, sold it, and sold some other things, extra copies I had. And we made back our booth money.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. At least you didn't lose the money from the booth. Okay.
Yeah. So we did that, and I said some of the local stores bought some copies. And I think I sold, we had boxes of, I can't remember how many were in a box. Can't remember if it was 60 or 100.
Mm-hmm.
But we sold one box, I think, worth. And basically, after that, things kind of stalled. I couldn't really afford to go back to Gen Con again. I think next time I went, it was either just to go as a gamer, or else I helped out at someone else's booth.
Right.
But like I said, unfortunately, I didn't have the money for a lot of publicity. Didn't have money for ads. I didn't even have a barcode on it because I just was naive enough not to know you needed to have a barcode.
Oh yeah, I just noticed that.
So someone looked at it there and said, "Oh, where's your barcode?" And I'm like, I don't know. So yeah, it was fun. It was an interesting deal. I still enjoy it. I still consider it one of my best works. And I continue to run it at conventions.
Oh, you do? Okay, that's great.
Well, I don't anymore.
Right.
I did.
You did. You did after that
for a
time.
while.
Right.
Yeah, most of the local conventions, and then when Gen Con did finally come to Indianapolis, I ran some of it there. I would always run. I'd run at least one or two Call of Cthulhu's, and then one or two rock stars.
So
So
I'm looking at the play testers here. I see a Vicky Barton. Is there any other folks besides her that stand out as play testers that you want to? Did they, on play testing, they helped you out? Because there's.
well, Bruce Coleman he was a good friend. He was my gamer buddy for a long time. He was the one we went to the game club together,
Oh, okay.
and he played most of my games. So I think he was on. He should be on there listed.
He is. He's the first one on there as the play
Okay.
testers.
Yeah.
So Aaron Burks, Chan Louderback. I'm just reading Randy Porter. So a bunch of people play tested, and so let's talk about the game itself. So again, we like first edition D&D because we played it back in the day, and we never. This is Dan and I, my co-host. We're just not one of these gamers who like playing lots of games. I've dabbled in more than him back in the day, but just the thought of learning another system is painful. Just it's like learning another language, which didn't enamor me. So I appreciated when Rob got it for me. But I'm like, oh, here we go. So I read it, and I'm first like, okay, I get it. And so here's what I like about it. I like it's rock and roll themed, which is cool. You can take it pretty much any way you want. I also appreciate that if you really wanted to run the game, you've played some other role-playing game, you really only need to read, I'm looking at, how many pages? 2 pages of rules. Page 22 and 23. And everything else it's a D6 system for those who are listening. So you don't need fancy dice. You don't need those fangled dice. Any 6-sided dice will work. You do need to understand, and I think you do a nice job explaining what a 2D1 is or a 2D3, because there's a lot of, obviously to get the amount of variations, you need to use different permutations of the D6. So I like that part. It's very interesting, again, coming from a D&D background, the idea of leveling up, there is a little bit of a leveling up kind of thing. So you could have a campaign if you wanted to. It always strikes me some of these games are challenging to keep the thing going from, whatever, level 1 to level. Like D&D becomes very hard to run as you get to higher levels. It just becomes, kind of breaks down. This, you could, I could see it continuing. I just don't know if people would be that interested in that. You'd really get wacky characters and keep the challenges from not ramping up. It's kind of like the Traveler situation. You mentioned Traveler, and I remember reading your article that you became sort of unenamored or not enamored with Traveler. And Traveler always was, you either were so poor, you had nothing, you're on other people's ships, or eventually you got your ship, but you could never have the Dreadnought because you need a cast of thousands to do that. So you either were poor or you got as much money as you ever needed, and it was kind of, then why are you adventuring? Here, for those who don't know, what you do is you create characters, and they typically have, there's, instead of 6 kind of statistics in D&D, there are 10. The additional ones are focused on performance and that type of, and luck, because again, you need that when you're doing performances. And then each of the characters gets a number of instruments that they learn based on their intelligence. And then ultimately they make a band, and then the band has attributes to it. So there's a band attribute, and there's the character attributes. And then it's up to the game master to take it where you want to take it. You could go, I guess the way I look at it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, when I looked at the thing, is you can either go Josie and the Pussycats, where you're kind of a bubblegum pop, and you go or Scooby-Doo, where you do mysteries like that, or you could go almost Call of Cthulhu. Now that I know the Call of Cthulhu background, there's a lot of the really deep horror kind of. You give a bunch of examples of how to run adventures, and there was a number of those in there. So, do you see any others that were very popular from when you ran the game itself yourself?
What I used to do, I would take some of the little mini adventures, and I would expand them to for the convention. I had one. Um, the total name is escaping me. It might have been I think it was the Shadow of Yog Eggnog, which
Right.
was a Cthulhu parody. And so I remember doing that one several times. I also had one that I never got around to publishing because I couldn't afford to publish anymore after the main game flopped. So, but there was one that was kind of loosely based on Yellow Submarine. Um, that actually a friend of mine and I, when we were in high school, I was the editor of the paper and he was the cartoonist, and we put together a cartoon that kind of melded superheroes with Yellow Submarine, and it ran for one semester. So I kind of took that as the basis, and had characters in it. And it kind of had fantasy characters like Slow Hand the Barbarian, and there was a huge wall called the Walrus,
Nice.
and then let's see, I had a giant snail called Quinn the Escargot, and it was just kind of wacky fantasy things together, and it was a similar goal to Yellow Submarine, but with different stuff. I'd started working on a rock and let's see, what was it? Rock and horror role playing supplement that would have all kinds of different horror aspects to it, um, brought into the game. Like let's see, I had the werewolves of London that were like, it was WEAR, and they were from Carnaby Street. They were 60s werewolves wearing psychedelic clothing and things like that. I actually had the artist that had done Rockstar had actually did some art for me for it before it turned out that it wasn't going to be feasible to do. So like I said, I'm only mostly I did those, and after a while it became apparent that nobody really was going to recognize the main adventure that I had at the end of the book. So I ran that at a few conventions too.
Right.
And
The obviously and your homage to Sherlock Holmes, the band that you have in here is Sherlock and the CDs,
right.
and there's an adventure in here. The Sounds of Vaster Hills is the
Mm-hmm.
adventure, and it's a nice beginning, not beginning module. It's an adventure of how to use it, because obviously when you're starting probably a new game, if you play D&D, or if it's another fantasy game, you got the trope, but this is okay. You're a rock and roll star. So what does that mean? So I think you do a really
Mm-hmm.
good job of, people have never played the rock and roll star, so they have a lot of definitions. So it's very clear you have a love of music and rock popular music, which is super cool in here.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. I think I don't want to call it criticisms, but I've only played it once. I GM'd it once for our play test, and we're going to play a test in here. I think some of the stuff would only be useful in a campaign, where a lot of the band stuff, again, if it's a one time, may or may not be as useful. I also have a question on. There's a lot in here. There's probably, I guess, what was your thought about putting a lot? It's not like there's a lot of it in here, but there is some things about combat, and you get into action, action phases, and it can get a little noodly as far as a lot of work involved with it. Whereas, I like Paranoia, which is still kind of crunchy in some things, but it's very dramatic, the fighting. It doesn't get very tactical. It doesn't get very, not a lot of rules as far as that. So was that a
Yeah.
conscious decision to put more, damage by, because you have lists for not only for sticks you throw, but shotguns and hand
Mm-hmm.
grenades and that kind of thing. So I was just curious, that kind of, when you put combat in there, I almost feel like people then want to fight. You know what I'm saying? And that shouldn't
Mm-hmm.
be the thing. So what's your thought on that?
Yeah, actually, that combat section, it was most of it was pulled from another game that me and some others were working on, which was a time patrol game, and it we had worked up a lot of rules on it. I worked up a lot of the combat stuff on it, and at the time, the company I was going to do it for, I think the name was Paranoia Unlimited or something like that. Anyway, when I was going to do it for them, they wanted a combat section.
Okay.
So I put the big combat section in. But then after they pulled out, and I got to thinking of it, and I was thinking, most people aren't going to use that. So I said I put in a quick and fast combat section. But for some reason, I decided that, well, I was told I should leave the main one in just in case for people who really like that sort of thing. So I left it in. Now, if I were doing it again today, I probably would have left that out. I'm just gone with the quick and fast combat section because whenever I ran it at games, I always just used the quick and fast one.
Yeah, and that to me was again, if I playing it once, so take my, this is for people out there. I would definitely get it, and I know Rob is working with you to procure a few copies, so maybe you can. I'm sure he'd work with folks to sell them, because this is it's a really fun game. It's the problem with like some of the older games, they're trapped in the 80s or 70s when the technology. Well, this is fine. You're playing rock stars from the 80s, which is the last. After that you got grunge, and that was the end of the rock star era. Really, there's only a couple of bands that.
Yeah.
U2 is probably the last Foo Fighters are probably the last two rock stars that I can think of. I'm sure there's others, but the rock star itself kind of, over the last 10 or 15 years has kind of disappeared.
Right. Yeah, I was actually working on an update for it that I was going to offer for people. It was going to be a 90s, thousands update. And I actually had it written up. Had actually did all the layout and everything on it. Did PDFs of it, and then before I could actually try printing it, I lost my job. They were doing a big cutback where I was working, and it was more economical to get rid of some of those of us who had been there a while,
right,
and get new people in who would work for less. So I ended up getting the axe, and at that point, cash became really tight. So, and then we moved right after that, and that's kind of somewhere all the update got packed away somewhere, and I have not seen it since.
Oh, well, and and I think people can. I mean, they get the general idea. So for those, the way this works, it's a skill-based game, and you roll attributes, and basically the idea is you have a task. If the player says they want to do something, the GM basically says, okay, that's you have to roll under the attribute that's appropriate, and the number of dice determines how difficult it is. So the more difficult, the more dice, and there are complications, as Bill calls them. So if they're trying to play guitar while on top of a bus that's moving and it's in a rainstorm, you have to roll into their talent 4d6 or 5d6. I'm just making up numbers here. And
Right.
if they're if they're highly skilled, they can increase their attribute by either 2 points or 4 points based on how skilled they are. So if they're a professional or expert, and so that's basically it. And so those who've played any other game, you basically set a difficulty score, and you try. In this case, you try to roll under. And a cool mechanic that Bill has. So I want to get your inspiration for this. You have natural highs and bummers, right? And so the idea is so the best roll, so if you have to roll 3d6, the best roll to roll under your attribute is a 3, and the worst roll, of course, is 18. And so where did you come up with that mechanic, and why did you put it in the game?
Oh well, I think I can't say I completely came up with it on my own.
Okay.
It seems to me that I remember playing a game somewhere where it did something like that, where the very um, if you rolled all the best score that you could possibly roll, then it was like an automatic success. And same thing with automatic failure. And I wanted to do that because in life, there's always a slight chance somebody can luck into something.
Yeah.
So I wanted to have it so that even if there were, if it looked like they had no chance in the world, if they happened to roll all threes on 3 dice, or or all ones on 3 dice, they could still succeed. They still had a chance. And the same thing there's always still a chance you might fail, no matter how much you know. So that's kind of why I did that, the natural high and the bummers.
And so just since I have you on, since I have some questions, uh, when so in theory it's harder to get those the more dice you have to throw.
Right.
So it's really so a normal check. So again, for those, it's 3d6 is the normal check. You are more likely to get one of those extreme successes or failures than you would if it's a more difficult task, basically. Is
Right.
that fair? Okay, good.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I thought I read. Um, so the character creation is lengthy but fun, meaning
Mm-hmm.
you've got a lot of things you have to figure out. Like we did have a little fun with this. So I rolled using your height chart, which is on page 5. It
Mm-hmm.
says roll d3 plus 3 plus 1d1 to get their height in feet. And then you may add 2d6 minus d2 inches for the exact height to the inch. So um, if you roll d3 plus 3 plus 1, at a minimum, they're going to be 4 foot tall, but
All right.
very likely it is very likely they're going to be there's like a 1 in 3 chance they're going to be 6 or 7 feet tall. And then when you add the 2d6 minus d2, so 2 of the characters were over 7 feet tall. They were like 7'6"
Okay.
and 7'11", and then on their weight, add a base weight of 90 pounds, add 3d6 minus 3 times 10, and then for female you could change a little bit more. I had to give them the minimum weight, 150 pounds, because they came under. So
Okay.
the story was 2 of them are like these twin towers that met in high school because they obviously were freakishly tall, because one was 7'6" and one was 7'11" or something, and 160
Okay.
pounds. So I don't know if you saw that in your play testing that, um, being myself 5'8", it was the land of the giants that we had here. It was a lot of fun to do that. So
Yeah,
um,
I don't. When we played this, I don't remember getting any really extreme results, but it may have just been it happened that way, and if at least it might have been something I would have rethought if I did a second edition.
yeah, I mean, basically, you have a 33% chance when I figured it out to get 6 or 7 feet because um, on the D3 you've got a 2 in 6 chance of getting or you have a 4 in 6 chance of getting 5 into 6, and a 1 in 50% chance to get that extra foot. So it's very common to get 6 or 7 feet, and then typically you roll 2d6, which is what average of 7 minus a d2. So you're going to be 6'6" or 7'6" very very frequently. So it was just funny. They just have these
Oh,
giant,
okay.
but and one of the other fun things that I saw in here is which it kind of reminded me a little bit of Traveler, but not exactly. So the claim to fame of Traveler, for those who don't know, is you could die in combat and character creation. Especially if you're going for scouts, right? That was if you're in
Right.
the scouts, you could die, but you got cool stuff. It was no risk, no reward. So you have this idea of quirks and disabilities, that these are rock stars and they should be weird, and so they have all these cool little quirks. And in order to buy skills, it's based on your intelligence, but you can get more quirks so you can buy more skills. Is that basically correct, right, Bill? Basically,
Yeah.
right. So people could be completely weird and have all these almost debilitating quirks, but you could be more talented there. So it really emphasizes the role play. So what was the motivation for that? Because I think that's a fun mechanic.
Yeah, I always enjoyed quirky characters. I remember playing in Tunnels and Trolls once. I think I ended up with a with a dwarf with a some kind of a speech impediment or something, or and was always and always sneezing, and so I just played that to the hills, played the character to the hills, and that was a lot of fun. And a lot of times the games that I was in, the odder the character, the more fun it was to play.
Right.
So that's why I set up the quirk system so that I think I did say I believe that if people roll a quirk they didn't like or didn't feel like it'd be fun to play, they didn't need to take it. They could try something else
Nah,
or
we ignore
re-roll.
that. I ignored that. I just whatever it came
Okay.
up. Yeah, that's. I,
Yeah, but yeah, for me it was always the most fun just to roll and see what comes up with, and then use my ingenuity and creativity to play that character. So I was hoping that others would see that as a way to be more creative.
oh yeah, to me that's incredible. That's so just kind of. Let me look at the. I'm going to give some ideas of the quirks
Hmm.
you can get. So obviously, you can be lazy, you can be compulsive, obsessive, you have delusions, you can have bad habit, flamboyant. So some of them are not outright punitive. They're just you have a pet peeve. You could be easily bored. So it'll be interesting. So when the play testers did it, they did try to work them in, and
Hmm.
depending on how many they have, it's easy for them to start kind of stepping all over each other, trying to be as quirky as the other person. But generally, it worked out pretty well. And then they have some ones that are um, disabilities, which is obviously worse than that. Physical addiction, um, hearing impaired. A few of them had that. So we basically took all these features that was rolled, and that's kind of came up with the backstory, which was super cool because so the story is so we play again. We're big fans of Dungeons and Dragons First Edition, and a lot of times these weird names they come up, and we thought, oh, that was a great band. They opened up for Venom or Metallica or whoever it was. So one of them is
Hmm.
Pseudo Undead. So we've taken it now to extreme. In fact, for those watching the show, I'm wearing my Pseudo Undead Ride the Cockatrice T-shirt that I got made, which is available on our store. For those shameless plug, please feel free to go buy one. It helps the show. So the idea was, hey, Um, let's use this game to come up with how the pseudo undead came to be and what their tour was and everything else. So that's what we're doing. We'll send you a
Oh,
copy of that. You can critique
okay,
it.
yeah, I'd love to see that.
Yeah. So we didn't do as much with the band itself. Now after this, we'll do more of the band thing. So I guess my question, since I have you on, it does. There is a discussion like about a battle of bands, but there really is no mechanic except for um, if Josie and the Pussycats, their overall success score, which is an average of the bandmate success, rolls, under and the other group doesn't, they win the battle of the bands. I'm just kind of paraphrasing. Did you have some more thought about, doing battles of the bands and writing that as rules in there? Because I would think a lot of the, in order to keep it away from the, Gonzo shooting everything up or Call of
Hmm.
Cthulhu, you do the Josie and the Pussycats where maybe the singer disappears and they try to find the singer, but then they're running up to the stage at the last moment and they're playing the battle of the bands. Is there any kind of thought you had with kind of fleshing out that aspect of it? And if you did, I missed it in the book.
Okay. Well, actually, I really hadn't thought about that. Um,
Well, there you go. You
you
can
know,
start working on that for us. We'd love to get you. We can have you. Our friend Rob. He's runs Smoldering Done Games. He's a publisher. He'll help you. Nowadays, it's easy to be a publisher. Everyone can be a publisher, Phil.
yeah.
That'd be great. Well, in your spare time, if you want to think about that. But go ahead. I'm
Perfect.
sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. It's just we're always
Oh,
excited
okay.
to help.
No, yeah, that's fine. I didn't have anything more on that.
Yeah, but you can see
Um,
where that would be kind of, I mean, am I right? That's basically the rules as written, that each band has a success score and you can adjust it, and then whoever wins, obviously, then that would be the battle of the bands kind of thing.
right. Yeah, that sounds like it would work well. I guess in most contexts. Yeah.
It's just what I'm, uh, it's the thing is, how do you make that more dramatic than just two roles? I'm just using that as an example. Like
Yeah.
there's three bands and they have three roles. Okay, and unless you're gonna have them role play, and then the GM is gonna role play the other band. And one of the things we did, so just to kind of give you a spoiler alert for those who are going to GrogCon and play in my adventure, do not listen to the next part because there's a spoiler. Um, they find half of a hit song. I'll just leave it that way. They don't have the other half. It's in the rooms. It's somewhere, but they can't find it. In fact, I purposely made it very hard to find so that the group would have to write the second verse before they went live. Because the adventure is about Don Kirshner is coming to the high school they're playing at.
Oh, okay.
You remember Don Kirshner, right?
Oh, yes.
Right. So the his niece is the vice president of student body affairs. So she convinces Don, who's in town, to come by and see this band. And so they've got this hit song, but they only have half of it. And so it makes the party have to come up with the second verse on the spot, which was a lot of fun to do that.
Oh,
So,
cool.
um, and there's more to it, but I'm trying again to make it more dramatic than just, all right, you guys roll into your success. One person rolls, you guys roll. I roll for the other group, and you basically kind of. So it would be interesting to see if there was some kind of challenge mechanic that it takes three rolls or a series of tests, three songs. I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking out spitballing here. I know we didn't talk about this beforehand, but I was just curious if you had any thoughts about that.
Um, yeah, I have to think about it,
Okay,
to
no,
be
that's
honest.
great. Yeah, you got our
So,
email. I'd love to you to, because I intend to run this every year because we're going to do the pseudo undead. It's this
oh,
year will be 1980. We lived 40 years ago. For us, it's 1982. So next year will be
okay.
1983, and they'll be on the next tour, and I'll
Uh,
write an adventure for that. So if you could come up with some, quick email what your thoughts are, we'd love to. It's always nice to have the author. You are the Gary Gygax of this adventures of this game. So it's always nice to get from the horse's mouth what you think about it.
okay.
So with that, again, any other thoughts? Any other things? So after Rockstar, did you continue writing things, or with regards to gaming or role playing?
Well, I I kept role playing for a while after that, but the old group kind of broke up
Yeah.
and things got a little complicated. Let's see, I got in a folk band for a while
Oh
playing
wow.
tenor
Okay.
bass, and played some rendezvous where everyone would dress like colonial gear and everything.
Hmm.
So I played with that for a few years, and then just unfortunately, like I said, things kind of drifted away until when I found out. Let's see, I'm trying to think of it was when Gen Con. I can't remember if it was when Gen Con started coming into Indianapolis, and at one point I was contacted again by I can't remember. I think it was somebody from Chaosium wondering what I was up to, and so I ended up doing some of their monographs,
Okay.
ones that they were doing the little publishing on the side, just cheap paper and stuff, but it was a complete adventure. So I ended up publishing just a couple of my Cthulhu adventures for that, including one about the return of the Ripper, and then did a supplement of rules and ideas I'd come up with for Cthulhu. So that was that, and then like I said, I was going to Gen Con, and I was running different Call of Cthulhu and Rockstar adventures mostly there. I think I had one that was took place on Mars. That
Oh,
again
okay. Cool.
incorporated the tripods, was kind of taking Call of Cthulhu into the future a bit. And then there was one I'd always a matchup I'd always wished to see was Cthulhu versus Godzilla. So I had a whole adventure on that.
Oh, that's amazing! Cthulhu versus Godzilla. Yeah, that'd be great.
So I did that, and last convention I went to was 2008. I had lost my job right before that, and then the money started running low, and then I had an illness come up, and so it's kind of been, I tried getting other jobs, but my illness kind of kept me from it.
Sure.
So I finally just retired. So now I'm retired on Social Security.
Well, I really appreciate your time, and thank you again for taking time today and talking about the great work you've done. And it's still evergreen. Would you have thought, 30-something years after, people are still playing it? That to me is always amazing. That's always a question I ask. When you wrote this, whether it's Space GURPS or Gaslight Cthulhu, do you think that it's amazing that did you think at the time that these people are going to be playing this decades later?
Oh, yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah.
I figured it'd be eventually passed for the next big thing. So.
Well, Cthulhu's still going strong. People love that, and we're going to do our best, Bill, to, sell this game, because it's a lot of fun. I mean, it's
okay.
It's again, I wouldn't plan to do a full tour with this. Our audience is not massive, but
Right.
I'm really looking forward to it. So I appreciate your time today. Do you have a D6 around near you?
Actually, nowhere close.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
No, it's okay. It's okay. So I forgot to send that to you, because what we usually do is we ask our guests to roll a D6 to figure out how well the show went. Or usually it's a D10, but in honor of So You Want to Be a Rock Star, we're doing a D6 because that's what the game is. So I will roll the D6 for you. So hopefully it'll go well.
All right.
I rolled a 3. So that's average. It's average.
Okay, average. Well, I can live with that.
Right, I can live with that as well. So again, thank you for your time today. And if folks want to contact Bill, if they're running the game, have any questions, I can send you an email forward from them. Is that okay to do?
Okay, yeah, sure, that'd be fine.
All right, great. So for GROGTALK, I'm James. And again, thank you, Bill, for your time today. And we'll see you next time on GROGTALK. Take care.
You take care, too.
GROGTALK was taped in front of a live studio audience.
We don't got no dragon bone in Hamlet, but dwarven magic you won't see. Clerics must have deities to worship, as written in the holy DMG. We like delving dungeons and looting. Every orc is evil through and through, and we don't stay our hands and spare their children like the 5e hippies in the game stores do. And I'm proud to be a first edition Grogcon, living by the dice and Gare's decrees. But we fear only level drain and poison, and DM smiling wide behind the screen.